closing comments before we open to the floor. The agenda of big business, of right-wing politicians and right-wing economists, is that this crisis in their system, in capitalism, will be resolved on the backs of the working class, in its broadest sense, working people in the private and public sector, unemployed people, and so on. As representatives of workers, we in the Socialist Party absolutely oppose that. As an elected member of the European Parliament for the whole of Dublin, the capital city, I am absolutely opposed to that. It's quite clear that the government is treating the union leadership with contempt. Unfortunately, the union leadership have put themselves in that position by their timidity and quite scandalously have conceded on the very night of the public sector strike 2 weeks ago that 1.3 billion should be cut from the public sector workers. We say it's time for definitive action. I would call for a 48-hour public sector strike as a first step in a campaign to say not a cent on the working people to resolve this crisis. Apart from anything else, if the 4 billion is taken out of the economy, and particularly if the 1.3 billion cut is made in public sector workers' pay, that will lead to further significant deflation in the economy, means that money will not be spent on the goods and the services that working people spend on their livelihoods, to live, for their children, and so forth. And what that means is thousands more job losses in the private sector, which is depending on their custom supplying the services and the goods, which incidentally shows how utterly ludicrous and short-sighted some of these small business organisations are when they join up in the reactionary calls for attacks on the public sector. Finally, I think this government has no mandate whatsoever. It is a discredited government without authority and should not be tolerated. It should be brought down. We need a general election as well, and strong action by workers can achieve that. Finally, dear friends, I would draw your attention to the true picture of public service earnings, which is the last page on our statement. This is taken from a reply to a Dáil question in February 2009, and is extremely revealing. That incredibly, nearly 1/3 of all workers are on 35 in the public sector are on 35,000 euro or less, and you see the vast number of workers are on low to middle, lower middle income actually, and that gives the lie to the disgusting campaign of vilification conducted by independent newspapers particularly, but also by other sections of the press over the past 15 months against the public sector, designed entirely to demoralise public sector workers so they accept these type of cuts, which then can be carried on to the private sector. So that's our position. Thank you for coming, and we'll take any questions if you like.
Joe, can I ask you a quick question? Firstly, obviously you don't want workers to take any more of a hit, and I don't think anyone does at the moment. Given the fact that you're putting forward a windfall tax, and that's only going to bring in about, I think, 500 million max tax on the rich or whatever, how exactly, what is your solution to bridging that exchequer deficit? And I suppose, you know, there's a 4 billion figure out there. Where would you find that 4 billion? And secondly, recently, I think with the National Day of Action, we saw workers' unions had marched people up to the top of the hill, had nothing to show them at the top. If you were to hold mass strike action, what exactly would you be able to promise people?
Right. We would go far beyond a windfall tax. I would call for an audit of wealth immediately in our society, a real audit of wealth. Let's expose where the wealth is. Let's expose also where the countless billions that were ripped off the Irish people during the boom by the developers and the bankers, where is that money now? It's not good enough to say it's in bad debts on sites. It went through the sites somewhere else. Where is it? We need that money now. I would say also in regard to this, critically, the entire focus is on workers and workers' wage cuts. Let's look at profits. If profits, for example, in this state were taxed at the same rate as workers, the effective tax rate on the working people overall is about 28%. On profits, it's 10%. If tax was, let's say, of the same magnitude as on workers, that would be about 10 billion extra.
So an increase in corporation tax?
Corporation taxes, yes. I'm illustrating the massive funds that are in society, but the political decision is that they will not be looked at, that it's only workers will be hit. I've often given the example of the multinational corporations. Apart from the overall profits of business generally, in 2007, 34 billion made by multinational corporations, about 4 billion of that paid in tax, because we have about the third or fourth lowest tax rate out of the 27 member states of the European Union. If they were taxed at the same rate as Germany, as Sweden or Germany, the tax take would be 8 billion and 12 billion respectively. I hope I got them in the right order. That would be of the 20 to 30%. The figures, I can get the figures to you. Unfortunately, I just haven't them now, but that's, I wrote in your own newspaper, in fact, on this, and I should have it here, but sorry. So there is massive wealth being created still, but it's a political decision of a right-wing neoliberal government, backed up by big business and a billionaire-owned press, that its workers must take the hit.
But it's just about the case of where you're going to get it, and also what you're going to
That's where it is.
In corporation taxes?
Yes, in taxes on profits, in taxes on wealth, and find out where the, look at the indebtedness of a whole generation of young people with these massive mortgages and negative equity. Where are the countless billions that they paid and will be paying for the next 30 years?
And what can you realistically promise people if you let them go on strike? Because the government actually at the moment seem to relish the fact that strikes may take place. They say it's about €60 million a day.
Well, you see, it's not just enough to say that we want strike action, industrial action, which we do, but we want definitive, active leadership for working people, both private and public. That's not a token strike to leave off steam. That is a determined fight to force the government to back down and possibly even bring down the government. Yes, that's our approach. Our bottom line is, workers didn't cause this crisis. They have fueled with their labour and their mortgages, etc., the massive profits that were made. And I cannot tell you how, as a TD for 10 years over there, how utterly infuriated I was in the last week to hear these roaring backbenchers clamouring for the public sector workers' wage cuts and heads, when I was in there for 10 years, pointing out what was going on, the rip-off that was taking place, and them jeering across the floor of the Dáil. Sorry.
Mr. Higgins, can I ask, you're saying there workers shouldn't pay a cent, and you also point out that nearly a third of all workers are on 35 or lower. Is there a point at which you think people should contribute something?
Oh yes.
Where is that?
Well, I mean, if you're on 150, 200,000.
Nothing below that?
Well, I'm not saying that as a definite. What I'm saying generally is that low to middle income workers, which is the vast majority. Now, what happened at the tops of the civil service, for example, was the worst features of private capitalism was aped in the public sector by government and the bureaucracy. All these bonuses and all the rest of it. And we have seen, which is used as a brush to tar the low and middle income workers generally. So as a principle, we're saying low to middle income people. Now,